Right. So we're here to talk about your new album, Sweet Misery, right? How's the been the feedback so far?
Really good. I mean, I'm so pleasantly surprised. I mean, to have 15 or 16, 17 albums, whatever it is at this point, and folks still, you know, helping me make records and buying records and turning new people onto the records. I feel really, really excited about it.
Right. Great. So the thing that amazed me is that you have Grammy nominations, 15 albums by now, right? But you still wanna keep this like independent vibe, right? So why choosing that path?
Well, I did the other. When I started making records in the late 90s, there was still, yeah, you would try to go and get a major label deal. And I did all of that and I learned a lot from it and had some success there. Um, but that's just a game that you play by somebody else's rules. And I didn't like that. I mean, I think the music that I make, there's some validity to having that bigger distribution and some of those sort of antiquated ideas. But as I started just doing it more on my own, the creative freedom
Right.
was worth the trade off for the, sort of red tape that you have to cut through to even try to make a record in that other situation. I just don't want to do anymore. I can, the technology is good enough now. I can get my music to the people that want to hear it, and hopefully, I still want to grow that audience, but I'd rather do that on my own terms and grow it slower than I would do it the other way and have to give somebody 60% of my money.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so as you say, you did that before and you saw all the changes that happened in the industry in the last, let's say, 20 years. Not
Yeah.
only technology wise, but everything has changed in the industry, right? So, but if you can bring back something from, I don't know, late 80s or 90s to nowadays, what that will be? Something that has changed, that you think it has changed for worse.
Yeah, I think especially here in the U.S., it may be a little different in Spain, but here in the U.S., there's been so much consolidation of radio and of ticket agencies where now one company owns basically every venue
Mhm.
and all of the ability to get tickets. So you lose a lot of the ability for young bands to grow and to build their own things when you used to have regional promoters and regional radio. Artists could build their individual careers.
Right.
You could take your hometown and go within an hour and 2 hours and 3 hours and build something in all these little markets. And you can't do that anymore. There's a handful of places that still have independent radio and independent promoters, but it's really um, fewer and further between. And the industry is worse for it for sure.
Right. Okay, so re-recording Carousel and Blackbird, those albums influence or re-recording those albums, going back to those times, influence Sweet Misery, maybe?
Yeah, quite a bit. I just haven't spent, I will pay attention to those songs and those early records when we're going on tour. We still play a lot of those songs live. They make it into the set each night. So I'm not wholly removed from those songs, but I haven't listened to those records in years,
Right.
decades probably. And yeah, to go back and revisit them, Carousel in particular, um, and just remembering the sort of joy that came. There's an innocence to it and a joy to it, just this real belief in rock and roll, I think, in those two records. And then re-recording um, Blackbird and kind of getting to do new versions of those songs was an extension of that too. And it informed very much what we did on Sweet Misery, because it was really trying to recapture that spirit of a rock and roll band playing songs together, in a room. Yeah, it was a
Right.
big influence on it.
Exactly. And as you say before in some interviews, you want to catch this like the live band feeling on Sweet Misery, right? A lot of artists are going for this. I think especially because in early 2000s, a lot of bands try to record these albums that sound very artificial, right?
Hmm.
So a lot of artists wants to go back to that maybe organic feeling of listening to an album and then going to the show and you are listening the same as you are listening on the record, right? I think that that was what you were trying to get on Sweet
Yeah,
Misery.
yeah, and I think that there's bands that do it the other way, where it's like you go in and you use all of this fancy stuff in the studio, and then when you go to play live, you either don't duplicate it, or you have to bring in, so many bands, especially in Nashville, they're playing with pre-recorded tracks, and they've got all these different. The string section is built in, and like you go to see a band and there's four guys on stage, but you hear 30 instruments, and it's like, well, where is all of that coming from? That's just not my favorite way to experience music. I mean, I don't care. The record you can make whatever you want, but I just think as the business continues to change, I think part of what people want at a show and they don't get nearly as often is just four or five, six, whatever people it is on stage really playing music together and letting it breathe and live and uh, speed up and slow down and get bigger and get smaller. Those things, it my favorite things are that sort of living, breathing organism of rock and roll, and I want to try and capture that both in the studio and live.
Right. What I really enjoy actually about Sweet Misery is that it got me that feeling of albums from 20 years ago that is you have to sit and listen to the whole album to understand it because nowadays especially with these streaming platforms it's all about singles like
Yeah.
you need to release like an album full of singles
Yep.
and you don't stop to listen to a whole album and then say okay I get it now. That's the feeling that I get from Sweet Misery. I don't know if you're tired also of this kind of I don't know what the industry is now like that you have to release singles and video clips all the time.
Yeah, but singles is weird. Singles used to be. Well, thank you for saying that first of all, because that's an important thing for me. Like getting an album, I think, like you're saying, we've gotten away from, we've just gotten so fast and so instant. Give me another song, give me another song, instead of putting your headphones on and having a beer, a glass of wine, or a Coca Cola, and sit for an hour and just listen. Like listen to the song, or put your family, sit on the couch, and instead of just putting Netflix on in the background, put a record on and listen. And
Exactly.
like you said, take the ride for what the record is. Yeah, those things are important to me. I think that matters. And singles used to be something, you put a single out because it went to radio and they could only play one song. But singles now just means, most people aren't even going to radio with a single anymore. You're just putting a single out on the internet and it goes to whomever or gets lost. And I understand there's a part of that that's necessary, but I feel a little bit like we're back in the 1950s again, where it was like, it was like everybody just made singles. And then
Yeah,
eventually, if you had a hit, you made another one. And then when you had like 10 hit singles, you'd put your record out. And then along came, you know, really the Beatles and Bob Dylan and folks like that, where it was like the album became a piece of work in and of itself. And by no means am I equating myself to the Beatles or Bob Dylan, but I
hmm,
do, those are sort of a couple of those North Stars that you look at and go, well, that's what, for me, what you're supposed to be doing is creating a piece of work that people, you're not going to hear every one of these songs on the radio.
yeah,
You're going to hear something, hopefully, that maybe it's on the radio or it's on a streaming service and you hear something, but then I hope that people will then go get the record and sit and really spend time with the entire album. That's the point.
exactly. Okay, so let's talk about the musicians, the recruiting process for Sweet Misery. How was it for you? Hard, easy? You have everyone in mind already, or?
Yeah, well, that's one of my favorite things as a producer now and making records. You know, I've been producing my own records for a while, off and on, but starting to work with other artists too. And one of my favorite things is when you get to do that kind of. It's almost like casting a movie, depending on what the record is. You know, you piece together this right group of people. Um, and with Sweet Misery, I was supposed to make a Tim Haas record, who's a dear friend, and I had made records for he and his brother Dave Haas. We've done 6 or 7 records together, and they needed to move their recording session, and I had put together this great band. Our friend Adam Willard, who's just a fantastic rock drummer, who I love. My bass player Chris was going to be on the sessions. Dave and I share a keyboard player named Mark Macefield, who
Mhm.
was on the session. Um, and then there's one of my favorite guitar players here in town is a guy named Nathan Keederly, and he was on it. And then Dave and Tim had to cancel their sessions, so I already had the studio booked and the musicians in place to make this really great rock and roll record for Tim. And I thought, well, this is as good a excuse as anything for me to finish a record that I had kind of started working on. Um, I had a few of the songs kind of partially done. So we took those into the studio and kept that band and recorded the remainder of it, and then put more stuff on a couple of the tracks that we had recorded without a band. And yeah, built it from there. And it was really great. It was the perfect group of people to have on these songs.
Right. So, if you've been producing also other artists, you must be aware of AI now, especially in music. What is the use that musician producers and people in the industry are doing with AI, right? So, what are your thoughts about it? Do you think it's helping in some sort of way, or
Uh,
not?
Not really. I mean, for me, I don't mean to sound like an old man. I just have never used it. It's not anything that's of interest to me. And I think it's like a lot of new recording technology. I mean, there's a point where I remember when the recording process went from recording to 2-inch tape to Pro Tools, and everybody
Mhm.
freaked out like this is going to ruin the industry. And Pro Tools at the time when it first came out, it wasn't as good. I mean, the sounds weren't as good. It would crash. You had to have somebody that most people didn't know how to use it. But then everybody was just trying to do it. It was like when keyboards came out in the 80s. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, everybody was like, we don't need drummers anymore. We'll just use keyboards, and strings can just be keyboards. And so many of those really bad sounding 80s records that were just made on a Casio keyboard. Um, but you go through and people realize some of this isn't good. Pro Tools was the same way, and you went like, okay, let's go back and use some of this other stuff. I would imagine AI is going to be a similar thing. I mean, maybe there are things that you can use it for, but I mean, for the most part, I I I don't see it leading to great things um, in the industry just because it's not creative. I mean, there's not. You're never going to compete with. It's never going to be better for me and my preferences. A
Mhm.
group of people sitting in the room together, recording. Um, that's going to always be the best way of going about it. And I don't know how AI could improve that. If there's somebody that can explain to me how, I'm all for hearing it. But
Yeah,
it's not something that I use at all.
exactly. All right, Will. So after 15 albums should be difficult to find some challenges, especially when you are songwriting something, right? Because I assume that after 15 albums, you already try everything you want to try, and you are already comfortable with your sound and what you want to do. But did you find any challenges in Sweet Misery,
I don't know that
songwriting
it's
wise?
challenge. Yeah, no, I mean, none that are new. I mean, I think
Mhm.
that in a good way, after this many albums, the writing process is something that gets comfortable, not safe and comfortable, but just whereas before sometimes you run up against something and you can get really frustrated when you're younger, like why can't I get this done? And now there's some age and experience to go, okay. I'll just put this down for a little bit, work on something else, and come back to this. And there's a patience with this much experience and age that I've developed, which is a good thing, not a bad thing. Um, no, I mean, I think the challenges are just how do you keep yourself inspired in the studio? Because it is, I could see where artists, you just sort of wash, rinse, repeat. You just go like, this is how I make a record. I go in and I do the same thing every time. And that doesn't sound very interesting to me. And but that can change by the style of songs that you're writing. I can change that by who I put in the studio with me. I can change it about where I work in the studio. And no, so the challenges are more exciting than things that are hard to get over. It's challenges that I look forward to now more than things that I used to be afraid of.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, if you have the chance to play Sweet Misery from start to finish live for the first time anywhere, do you have a favorite city, a favorite venue? Would you like to do it?
I mean, the Ryman here in Nashville is always really special. If you haven't seen a show there, it's worth traveling to Nashville just to see somebody play there. It really is a special place. But the other thing we laugh all the time is we're looking at shows in Spain in general. I mean, one of my favorite things that has really given me and the band life over these last couple of years when we play live is the Spanish audiences across the board, their willingness to really take the roller coaster ride and go, if I can walk out on stage and I've got an acoustic guitar and I'm playing really quietly, you know, 500 people in the room are packed in, but they're really quiet and they know to listen. But then when it blows up and gets big, those audiences sing along and know every word and every guitar part. So we're talking about making a live record when we come back to Spain. So I would have to, and not just because this is a Spanish interview, but Spain as a whole would really be something. I hope that everyone there will get a chance to listen to the record so that when we come back in 2026, they'll be ready to sing along and have a good time with us.
Oh, great. Well, Will, just to finish the interview, do you think that your songwriting has really changed, really evolved in the last 20 years? I mean, if you can go to your younger self from 20 years ago and you see yourself playing music, writing music, and go back now, 20 years in time, do you think that it has changed a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's at the core. I don't know that it's changed a lot. I mean, at the core, I still want to hear something that moves me. I want to feel the lyric or have a cool guitar part. Like there needs to be something that gives me
Mhm,
a vibe. That I hope never changes.
mhm,
What has changed is I think the ability to really whittle things down and sort of go, okay, I feel like my fat trimming process has gotten better over the years, really trying to make sure that every lyric or everything there is needed. Uh, so that part I feel like has gotten stronger.
right.
And like I say, my patience for the process. I see certain things that when I was younger, you might let something sort of skate through. Maybe it's a lyric that you're like, I don't know if that's right, but it's fine. Um, Without over analyzing, now I think I'm able to go, okay, let me try and see if I can beat that. Because sometimes you can. Other times you go, man, it really is. It's great the way it was. But that's
Yeah.
something that I've gotten better at. The process of songwriting, I've definitely I feel better about, and being in the studio is something for years I was really uncomfortable with that. But that process
Yeah.
has gotten. I mean, I'm talking to you from my studio here in Nashville now.
Yeah.
Having a place that I can come to and work and really be creative with that has taken the walls of intimidation are gone, and now that's something that's really comfortable too. So that's changed.
Great. I'm happy for you. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and for the interview. Okay. And hope you record that live album here in Spain.
I hope we'll see you there, man. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.